Welcome, everybody. As you're entering this space, please drop in the chat a feeling that surfaces when you hear the word data. We have quite a few lovelies in the chat. Sarah, I can't see the chat yet, but I can.
Excited. Oh, we have like different ends of it. Excited, powerful, interested, confident, curious. And then we have things like overwhelmed, frustration, ugh.
Ugh is, yes, that is a feeling. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Reflective, interested, excited. There's a lot. I'm impressed. There's a lot more like, curious, excited.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, you're in the right session wherever you are on the spectrum of feeling about data. So we want to welcome you here on behalf of the GRAD Partnership to today's session. We are going to be focusing on data for student success systems. Say that 3 times fast. Data for student success systems. All right. For those of you who are new to our community, we want to just set some groundwork here. Who are we? You're like, who are these wonderful people? I'm so glad you asked. We are the GRAD Partnership, and the GRAD Partnership consists of a consortium of student success organizations who are invested in spreading and scaling the use of high quality student success systems. And we'll learn a little bit more about that later. And why are we dedicated to doing that? Because we want every young person across this nation to graduate ready to live successful lives as adults. All right. So you may wonder who those organizations are. Well, there are 9 of us, 9 organizing members of the GRAD Partnership. And amongst us, we each come with decades of experience working not only with schools, but also directly with school districts and state departments of education to help implement school improvement systems, everything from multi-tiered systems of support, early warning systems, on track, college readiness. This is our crew, and welcome. We're so happy to have you here today. For those of us who are joining this community of practice for the first time, we start every session by reviewing the objectives for the entire series. And so our objectives over the course of these COP sessions are to increase awareness of student success systems. Again, we'll describe a little bit more later, to make plans around its elements. And then lastly, and not leastly, to build community amongst us within this space so that we bring our best selves to supporting students towards success. All right. So who are your tour guides for this journey today? You have me. I'm Chris Payne. I am the executive director at the University of Chicago Network for College Success and one of the organizing members of the GRAD Partnership. And we also have with us today tour guide Sarah Howard, who is also from the Network for College Success, and she is our director of professional learning. All right, we're elated to have you here with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to set us up for the session.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Many familiar faces in the room and some new friends as well. So we are a community of practice, and as such, we ask that you take a moment to include your name, organization, and location in the chat. And also, if you could take a moment and update your name in Zoom by clicking on the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner so that it includes your name, your organization, and your pronouns.
Sarah, we have both coasts today. We have
both coasts representing. And the middle, and the southern coast. New Orleans.
Yes, I'm seeing Ohio. I'm seeing Missouri. I saw New York City up in there. Yes, yes. Welcome, Colorado.
We love it.
Kentucky is here as well.
I know. We're just going to keep shouting it out.
Yeah, I know, right?
So Washington, seriously, like everywhere.
Everywhere.
Love that. We love bringing the nation together to think about how we set up systems for supporting student success.
Indeed.
So as a community, we operate by some agreements. The purpose of this is to make space for us to step into vulnerability and really do some stretching together. So first thing is we ask us to watch our airtime. We, not me. What's the wisdom of the room? A friend of mine says the smartest person in the room is the room. So we like to get many voices into the space. We know that in an hour, we're not going to be solving everything. So we have to accept non-closure, and we get what we can from the space in the time that we're here. You will be in some smaller groups sharing based on your actual practice. And so we ask that you keep your colleagues' stories here at the community of practice, but you take the ideas with you to your context. And in order for us to walk away with good learning, we've got to share with each other. So we share to learn. And as you can tell, Chris and I, we love to bring joy. We ask that we all do that. When we're in a joyful space, the learning sticks. Alrighty, so one of the things that we do is we anchor our work in this student success team reflection and action tool. You will see in the activity guide, which let's drop that link again for everybody. There is also a link to this reflection and action planning tool. We'll be referring to it throughout our session, as well as throughout our series. And then finally, we just wanted to show you where we are with our series. So we completed in the fall a 3-part series about building collective effort, really thinking about the conditions that we put in place for student success systems. And this series is more about, and so then how do we really get into action? And we're starting off with looking at data for student success systems. All right, so let's talk about some data. I want to situate that within the definition of student success systems that we use at GRAD Partnership. So you'll see that we have 4 parts of our definition, or 4 components of it. Supportive relationships and student-centered mindsets are those conditions that we dug into in more detail in the first series. And then improvement actions and actionable data are what we're going to really dig into in this series. And today we're getting into this idea of actionable data. All right, so because Chris and I are smart, we know that we don't know everything. That's what makes us smart. And so when we don't know everything, we think, who do we know that knows that better than us? And in this case, we brought along some friends. Our friends, Amanda Baltikas and Jasmine Furman, are data strategists at the Network for College Success. And so who better to guide us through thinking about how do we make data actionable? What do we need in place to support our teams than to bring these 2 ladies? So Amanda, take it away.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome. Yeah, we are here to guide you through thinking about data for student success systems. I had to write it down a couple times because it is a mouthful, but an important one. As we begin, let's anchor this part of the presentation in practice-driven data. It's a research paper about lessons that we've taken from our approach to data use in Chicago Public Schools. So take a minute, read this quote, and then we'll engage with each other. All right. Maybe you've noticed some pain or passion points as you read. We notice that data brings up a variety of feelings with us. As you drop them in the chat, it was exciting to see the way data shows up in our body emotionally. We're going to go into a turn and talk in a breakout room where we want you to think about, how would your teachers describe the data culture in your school? your staff, thinking about what feelings might show up for them, but how would they describe it when we're talking about improvement and accountability? So as we get into this, and we've talked about data for improvement and data for accountability, and that we need a balance of them, we want to reiterate what is data for? And before we get into these three on the screen, I want to think about our first touch with data was probably data for research, maybe in college or grad school. We were all introduced to it, and it set the tone for data. The data had to be strong, valid, peer-reviewed, maybe even perfect, right? We took it as the way it needed to be. And when we work in a system like a school system, that's not how data always shows up. So after we had data for research, this was like grounded in our schools, there's data for accountability. So data for school ratings, evaluator, education evaluations, and data for outcomes, right? We're thinking about school report cards, test scores. From that movement, we got data for improvement. So thinking about how are our instructional teams using data that's non-evaluative, it's shared, it's really messy, and it's something that you could do next Tuesday. I could take this piece and apply it to my practice and have something else to do and reiterate and iterate on. But what we're here for as NCS data strategists and for data for student success systems, we really want to think about data for transformation. So we're taking parts of accountability and parts of improvement to support our least served students. And this is a transformation not only of, say, scores and outcomes in a building, but really transformation of ourselves, our community, and our culture. Because the bottom line, the things that need to move in our school are really our educator values, our beliefs, our prior experiences. And so we show this to say, data's in a context, right? Even it's situated within context we've been experienced in prior years of education. And knowing that, we have to have some core values so that when we approach data, we have the certain conditions in place for our folks to transform themselves. So up on the screen, you're seeing these are our 7 core values of practice-driven data that we use and build and as a condition in schools to situate ourselves so that we could have the right conversations of data. So data conversations are effective when they're focused on learning and collaborating rather than shame and strict accountability. Maybe some of those feelings that came up in the chat earlier about data was because we were shamed for something in relation to data, or we felt accountable to a metric. As you read through these and we're talking about them, think about which one you would want to bring into your building or maybe your team or a different space that you're in that to support a data-driven culture. One we'll hit upon later is really how data practice needs to happen at different ways at every level of school. So principals looking at different data, teams looking at different data, but to the same aim. And one I want to really hit home about are the last two, that not everything that matters can be measured. So while we know that data for research is something that's quantifiable and we can look to it, not everything matters. Your experiences matter. Things that we see in the classroom that can't always be given a number value are important too. And that we need to make space for emotions. Just like Sarah set it up at the beginning, we have to let those emotions out, but we're not going to let it get in the way of the work. And so while we look at data on a team, you're building these core values as you go. So it might not feel great at first, but as you begin to rumble and dive deep into data, these core values are stronger. They're almost as our norms. But yeah. Okay, I'll pass it to Jazz, my counterpart.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Furman, also data strategist at NCS. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what does taking these adaptive concepts and what does this look like in the technical aspect? So how can some technical school tools support us in thinking about how do we do data for transformation in schools? And so one of the things that Amanda has mentioned is around like providing data at the right time at the right for the right people and at the right level. And so one of the things that in the practice driven data paper, which is available on our website, it talks about how do we strategize for the year. And so we implement and support a lot of our educators in building a data arc for the school year to support their data strategy. And so a data strategy is like, what are your goals? So like, we are all part of it. If you work in a school system, you're part of a district, you have some goals that you need to get at the end of the year. So how are we monitoring those goals throughout the year? You also, as a principal, have goals for your own school community. And so how are we making sure that we're also monitoring those goals throughout the year? And so building a data arc to support that strategy in the beginning stages, like the summertime, can really help you stay engaged in that progress monitoring. The other thing that a data arc allows educators to do is to match their meeting frequencies with a data focus. And so if you are supporting a team, a grade level team, senior leadership team, admin team, and reviewing data, you're already planning what is the data that is going to be relevant to us at which point in the year. So for example, if you're part of a post-secondary team and you are supporting around college enrollment, you're probably going to be looking at enrollment data really early on in the school year in the fall. If you are part of a freshman success team where you're working with 9th grade teachers, one of the things that you want to start looking at really early on is risk and opportunity data that comes from research from the University of Chicago as well, where we're looking at prior year academic and attendance data from our students to get a sense of how strong were they academically, and how can we support them before they even enter the building. So having an idea of what data to review at certain times can really help us properly think about what supports we're going to need to provide our students. Also, what are some of the celebrations we can prep for in the throughout the year, because it's not just about the areas of interventions, it's also like what are some bright spots that we want to make sure we're capturing. So here you have a sample of what a data arc can look like for an admin team at a school. You have and the next slide, you don't have to change it yet, but we'll look at, no, you can go back, different levels. But here you have what the data focus of a team looks like, and then what the data focus of an admin, principal, AP looks like, and a rationale. So if here we think about the 10 month of a school year, like I said, in the beginning of the school year, you're going to be looking at most likely behavioral, attendance, and academic data from the prior year. For an admin, you're going to be looking at the big picture. So not individual students, but like how many, are 50% of my students coming in with strong academics, are they strong, low attendance? You want to have an idea of what your student body is looking at the beginning of the year. You can also do this for 10th graders. So how did our 10th grader end their 9th year? Was it 100% on track? Was it 80% on track, etc.? So it's not limited to 9th grade. It's, you're always thinking about prior year data early on versus like the third quarter, which we are right now. It's usually a very slummy time for some reason. We need to get some research out there. So if you're into the research field, but third quarter, there's been so much data where we see that it's always a slump. We call it a third quarter slump, where students' grades just are not the best. And it's probably because of the season, the type of work that we're doing around this time. I don't even know. We have a lot of theories, but that is a data that you want to make sure you're monitoring in January, February. So again, these are things that you as a principal, you want to think about making sure that you're getting at, so that you're supporting students, you're supporting your educators properly throughout the year. Now you can go to the next slide. And one of the things that we, outside of just having like a data arc, the other thing that you want to have is different visuals. I think that I like to say that I think a lot of our schools and districts are data rich. We have so much data that we can access at any point in time, but we don't need to access all that data all the time. And it's really important to not only have the right data for the right people, but the right visuals. Some people give student data to people that don't have any touch with students. And so you're looking at a student list, but you can't really do much about it. Then you get really caught up in the details. So it's really hard to get to action because a simple visual just took you out of having that hard conversation as a principal you needed to have. And so I think that is very important that we kind of identify what data, understand our teams very well so that we're able to provide them with the right data and the right visuals to have the conversations they need to have to get them to action. And so the first visual right here is a quarterly graph just to show high level data that an admin can probably engage with on a quarterly basis. The second visual is more detailed. You can take this, we can look at on track, failures, etc. But then let's say that we want to know by student group. So my team is really focused on supporting our least reached students at the moment. And we've identified that our least reached students are African American boys. So we want to make sure that we're looking at that data disaggregated. So how are all African American boys currently experiencing our schools right now? So we can take this on track data and disperse it by student demographic so that we're able to get to that. And then, so that's where something that you can engage in a team meeting. And then to follow up to that, you can then provide teachers with a roster of those students so that then when they go to their classrooms, they can work with those students individually. Or you can provide a roster of students to an attendance team so that they can target those students correctly. So this is just knowing what visual to provide to the right team so that they can actually go and do the thing that they need to do, and not get them bottled up with things that they might not be relevant to their work. And with that being said, one of the things that we were thinking about, what are some conditions as principals that we think, or in school system that I think kind of support this data strategy? And the first thing is having a data person. I know it's not an easy thing to do, but having someone at the school who knows how to engage with data, understands this concept of data lives in different places is really important. I feel like we work at a lot of different schools where someone is a teacher that is usually the science and math teachers, because they work with numbers, that are being tasked to do data. And so ideally we want to have just a data person doing data, because this is an ongoing process throughout the year. So you want to be able to have a designated individual to really do that work. The other thing that also gets in the way a lot is access to data. So we can't have conversations around data if I can't access the right data. So let's say that you are, you can afford a data strategist, but you're asking a teacher to do that, but the teacher doesn't have access to grade level data or grade level data outside of the department. So then it's hard for them to bring data to the team space because they don't even have access to it. So having the right access to the person that's in charge of the data is really important. The other thing is system to transform that data. So Google Sheet is something that, there's so many videos out there on how to transform data and make amazing dashboards, make it interactive, make it all the things. There's also systems that are a lot more advanced, like Tableau, Power BI, that can really create really awesome visuals. But having a person that can kind of transform this data, not from lists or pivot tables, but really into something that can really, impact the team spaces, even impact your own leadership, I think is really important. And the last thing is time, having dedicated time to do this work. It takes a lot to not only disaggregate data, go through data, and build everything, but also thinking about how do we socialize data. As I mentioned earlier, we want to be, I think it's important that we're intentional about how we engage with the data. And so it's not just let me just bring a visual and let people run with it. No, let's bring a visual, let's structure it where we have people make meaning of their feelings, because feelings are going to come up. We structure it where we have people not engage with the think about implementations, but let's like do a protocol where we're having them just observe the patterns so that we can kind of step a little bit out of it, see it from a different perspective, and then come back and then engage it from that place. And then also have a structure where we can get them to action. Because at the end of the day, we do want to see some movement. There's always space for no movement where that's what's needed. And then there's space where we need to kind of move the needle. So these are a couple of things that we think we've worked in supporting our educators and teachers and principals in implementing in their schools, because we feel that these are the things that really support a data-driven culture. And all around the data for transformation umbrella. Anything that I missed?
Just saying in case people didn't pick it up on the data arc slide, the sample BAG stands for behavior, attendance, grades.
Yeah, sorry. Do we have time for questions, comments, thoughts, or?
I would say let's take a couple in the chat. If people have a clarifying question, we're gonna go and make sense of this together. And think about, like, given some of what Jasmine and Amanda shared, how are you now thinking about your data culture and what action might you take? So if it would be helpful to ask a clarifying question before you dig into the meaning making, throw it in the chat. And we'll have a little time to report back out when we get back. So seeing none, I'm gonna say, let's go have some conversation. Let's think about this in our own context. Okay, quick. Now the real question is, are they in breakout rooms or are they gone? Both quantitative and qualitative data. So going beyond the numbers into the stories. And also somebody who really appreciated Jasmine's point about the need to tailor the visuals to the audience and role, so that principals and teacher teams may be looking at different visualizations of the data. Every data point represents a complex human being.
Love that. Yes, put that on a t-shirt. Love it. Love it. Indeed, indeed. So thank you. Keep those thoughts coming in the chat. And in the meantime, we have a little extra, a few minutes. And by few, I mean like a couple of minutes. Are there any questions that are coming up for you at this point that you would like to ask of Amanda and Jazz while they're here with us? All right.
Oh, I do have a question. I came in late. Shalnika Adams from Louisiana Department of Education. Absolutely love what I heard and enjoyed my time with my small group as well. But I do have a question. When we talk about data, I think I've asked last year at one conference, how do I get superintendents to trust me with their data and know that I'm not trying to use it against them, but rather help them develop initiatives that would be supportive of what their data is revealing. That's one question. And the other question is, how do we take the data that we're getting and make it a way that it's presentable to our families as well? Simply because if we're going to, like, one of the tenets in Louisiana is our parents are our partners. So if we're truly treating them like our partners, then the information that we're gathering with this data should be shared not only to all stakeholders, right? So I guess my two questions are, one, how do I get at the top, how do I get them to trust me with their data? And at the, not the bottom, but at the root, how do we share that data so that it truly is actionable and accepted by those that it's going to serve ultimately.
I'll let you take that. They're amazing questions.
Yeah, great. So I think it's twofold when you talk about getting the data at the top, right? So there's some values and feelings you probably need to unpack with the superintendent around trust and what data is used for. Creating a data arc to show your purpose and strategy for why you need the data is a great way to tackle that. And then on the flip side, when you're bringing it to parents and students, I think we have assumptions about our families sometimes and our students about what data needs to be represented to them and how do we show that. I encourage you to bring data to your families and students and socialize it with them. I think we've had success in bringing students to convenings and having them sit and rumble with the data, because there's a saying one of our colleagues says, nothing about me without me. And so when we bring them to the table, we can co-generate things and have dialogue that wouldn't be as fruitful when they're not there. So I think thinking about what is the story you want to tell with your data to your teachers and families and students, and what visuals would guide that along. And it doesn't always need to be a graph. It could be pictures and infographics. As anything?
Yeah, I would say no, that's great. And you were saying grab, it can be anything. Like I feel like well, going back to like the trust, I feel like one of the things that the reason we wanted to bring our core values is because grounding the conversation around like what is the data for can help us kind of surface in that moment maybe, and like you can even use the core values as a way to engage them. So like let's review these core values and what feelings like come up when you read them, and what is one that you want to hold while we're engaging in this data. So I feel like really using that as a tool to support the conversation around data can kind of help work and build that trust. And that's something that if you want, and it sounds you want to be intentional about it, I feel like just continue to do that, and with time they will kind of get there. I know we've done it many times where we've had teachers like, nah, oh sorry, my New York came out. No, I don't want to engage with this at all. But then they do. And so I think is going back to how data for accountability has been used so heavily to harm folks. And so people just have a lot of feelings towards it. So I think we always want to make space for that reality and also show them that there's another way that we can do it. And we just kind of have to be consistent about that. And then, yeah, especially when it comes to family, like co-collaborating the data and the visuals and how we engage with data, I think is key. We're not doing anything for them. We're supporting, this is for us and them. And so bringing them to the conversation and to the work is, I think, really important. And, yeah, we make assumptions that they're not going to know, or they're not going to, but I feel like we'll be surprised how much we'll learn just from asking them, like, what do you think will really bring you into this space? So yeah, I would say go directly to the source and have them bring them into the process and collaborate with them and thinking about what visuals and data really works for them and helping them understand it.
And maybe tap into their inner parent, right? If I had a young person in school, what would I want to be able to access or know?
Right on. Thank you, Jazz. Thank you, Amanda. We're going to, before we close out this session today, we want to make sure to share some considerations and tips. So one of the considerations that we want you to take up is take stock of what data you've access to, particularly data around those elements that you have not historically collected data on. For example, student well-being, their belongingness, and their school connectedness. And then ask yourself, in what ways are we gathering this information about our students to better inform what we're doing with students? All right. The second thing is you want to make sure that you're building in cycles of data review. Both Amanda and Jazz talked about that, having a rhythm, having an arc, so that you are able to not only check interventions, but also to be proactive. And you want to ask yourself, how frequently are you able to not only access that data, but also have time to analyze it at multiple layers in your system? And then ask yourself, is it often enough for us to be impactful? If not, then now it's time for us to think about how do we revise our data arc so that we're able to be impactful for our young people. And then the last consideration we'll share with you today is making sure, and I'm so glad, Shonika, am I saying your name correctly? I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Absolutely perfect.
I did not pay Shonika to ask the question that led to this consideration. I promise you. How are we inviting students and families into the conversations that can affect, that can affect a student's not only academics, but also their experience within the school community? And so we're asking ourselves, in what ways do we seek families' voices and insights? And then how are we learning from with our students, and how are we working with our students with this, when the data indicates that we got to provide additional supports. We got to get better at supporting our young people. Now, these considerations and tips and questions are actually in your activity guide through some resources. The first resource is a GRAD partnership brief that's on holistic real-time actionable data. And then the inquiry questions in the right column are included in the reflection and action tool that is also hyperlinked in your activity guide. So please refer to those. There are more considerations and tips, and there are more inquiry questions to support you in your journey as we use data to support student success. Now, before I go on, I think we have our survey, right? Let's go to the next slide. All right, we want you to share your feedback. So as you can see, there's a QR code on the screen. You can give us your feedback through that. There's also a link being dropped into the chat. Please let us know what worked from this session, what questions you still have. There's also additional questions about how can we make this better. We need to hear from you. We thank you so much. You could have invested your time and energy anywhere else, but you chose to be with us today, and we are so thankful that you did. So thank you so much for coming, and please join us for our next COP. You're like, wait, there's more. Yup, there's a whole lot more. So let's go to the next slide. On March 13th, we're expecting your face back in this place for session 2, which will be on building systems for adaptive analysis, response, and improvement. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to the GRAD Partnership Community of Practice newsletter? You'll get a whole lot of details. Amen, amen, amen. And last but not least, we're on Twitter, now called X, I think. And you can check us out at GRAD Partners. Right on. We look forward to seeing you soon. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks, everybody.